In a small, sleepy town called Maplewood, where life moved slower than the rusted pickup trucks that rattled down its dirt roads, there lived a man named Henry Carter. He wasn't flashy or loud. In fact, most people wouldn't notice him unless they were looking for help fixing their car. But those who did know him would tell you something special about Henry. There was kindness in his eyes, the kind that didn't need words to be understood. Henry ran a tiny garage on the edge of town, tucked between an old diner and a field of wildflowers. It wasn't much, just a couple of lifts, some oil-stained tools, and shelves stacked high with spare parts. But it had been in his family for 3 generations. His granddad started it back when cars still had hand cranks, and now it belonged to Henry. To him, it wasn't just a job. It was home. Every day, folks from all over Maplewood came knocking at his door. Some brought broken-down tractors. Others hauled in clunky sedans held together by duct tape and prayers. No matter what shape the vehicle was in, Henry always found a way to fix it. And if someone couldn't afford repairs, well, he'd slide them a discount, or sometimes even do the work for free. But despite his good deeds, Henry kept to himself. He wasn't one for parties or big gatherings. Instead, he preferred the quiet hum of engines and the satisfaction of seeing something run again after hours of tinkering. Life was simple, predictable, and safe. That's how he liked it. One sunny afternoon, as Henry bent under the hood of a beat-up truck, he noticed movement out of the corner of his eye. Across the street near the park where kids played tag and chased each other around, sat a little girl in a wheelchair. She was watching the others play with bicycles and scooters, her hands resting lightly on the wheels of her chair. At first glance, she seemed like any other kid, bright-eyed, curious, full of energy. But there was something else, too. A sadness lingered behind her smile, almost invisible but unmistakable once you saw it. It tugged at Henry's heartstrings in a way he couldn't explain. He wiped his greasy hands on a rag and squinted across the road. The girl looked no older than 8 or 9, with curly hair tied back in a ponytail and a faded t-shirt covered in doodles. She wasn't alone. Her mom stood nearby, chatting with another parent, but it was clear the girl felt different. While the other kids zoomed past her, laughing and shouting, she stayed put, quietly observing. Something about her stuck with Henry long after she wheeled away. Maybe it was the way her fingers drummed absent-mindedly on the armrests of her chair, as though she wished she could join the fun. Or maybe it was the spark of determination in her eyes, refusing to dim even though she couldn't chase after the others. Whatever it was, it lingered in his mind like an unfinished tune, nagging at him to figure out the melody. That evening, as Henry locked up the garage and headed home, he couldn't shake the image of the girl in the wheelchair. He wondered what her story was, why she seemed so isolated despite being surrounded by friends. Was it because of the chair? Did she feel trapped inside it while the world raced ahead without her? As he walked through the quiet streets of Maplewood, the idea began to form in his head, a vague, half-baked thought that made him stop in his tracks. What if he could build her something? Something that would let her move freely, explore the world on her own terms? Henry chuckled softly to himself. "You're getting ahead of yourself," he muttered aloud. Building something like that would take time, effort, and probably more money than he had lying around. Besides, he barely knew the girl. Why should he stick his nose into her business? And yet, the thought refused to leave him alone. By the time he reached his front porch, he realized he couldn't ignore it. If there was even a chance he could make a difference in this girl's life, wasn't it worth trying? Little did Henry know this simple act of curiosity and compassion would set off a chain reaction that would change not only the girl's life but his own, and perhaps the lives of countless others too. For now, though, all he had was an idea, a seed planted deep in his heart, waiting for the right moment to grow. The next morning, Henry woke up with the same thought buzzing in his mind like a persistent fly. He couldn't shake the image of the little girl in the wheelchair, sitting alone while the world seemed to spin faster around her. It wasn't pity that drove him. It was something deeper, a mix of curiosity and an ache to help. Henry had always believed that if you could fix something broken, you should. And though the girl wasn't broken, he felt like there was a way to make her life just a little brighter. After finishing breakfast, a quick bowl of cereal and a cup of strong black coffee, he decided to ask around town about her. Maplewood wasn't the kind of place where people kept secrets. Everyone knew everyone, and news traveled faster than a flat tire on Main Street. So, it didn't take long for Henry to find out what he needed to know. He stopped by the local bakery, first where Mrs. Peterson, the owner, greeted him warmly. She was kneading dough behind the counter, flour dusting her apron like snow. "Morning, Henry," she said with a smile. "What brings you here? Need some fuel for your day?" Henry nodded and picked up a donut, but his mind was elsewhere. "Actually, I was wondering about that little girl who sits in the park sometimes, the one in the wheelchair." Mrs. Peterson's hands paused mid-knead. Her face softened and she sighed. "Oh, her. Poor thing. She's been through so much." Henry leaned against the counter, listening intently as Mrs. Peterson filled him in. The girl was 8 years old and had been paralyzed from the waist down since she was 4. A car accident, a drunk driver no less, had stolen her ability to walk. But despite everything, she never complained. In fact, she was known for her bright spirit and endless imagination. She loved books, especially stories about space and faraway planets. She dreamed of becoming an astronaut someday, even though she knew her body might never let her leave Earth. As Mrs. Peterson talked, Henry's heart sank. He imagined what it must feel like to be trapped in a chair, watching other kids run and play while you could only sit and watch. To have dreams bigger than the sky but feel stuck on the ground. It wasn't fair. Life wasn't fair. But maybe, just maybe, he could do something to change that, even if only in a small way. By the time he left the bakery, Henry had made up his mind. He would build her something, a mini-car specially designed for her needs. Not just a toy, but a real vehicle that could give her a taste of freedom. Something she could control herself, something that would make her feel unstoppable. But before he started, he knew he had to talk to her mom. What if she didn't want strangers meddling in their lives? What if she thought Henry's idea was silly or impractical? He pushed those doubts aside and headed to the address Mrs. Peterson had given him. When he arrived, he found himself standing in front of a modest house with peeling paint and a garden full of wilting flowers. It wasn't much, but it looked lived in, cozy. A woman answered the door after Henry knocked. She looked tired, with dark circles under her eyes and streaks of gray in her hair, but she smiled warmly when she saw him. "Can I help you?" she asked, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "I'm Henry," he said, tipping his cap. "I run the garage over on Oak Street. He hesitated, suddenly feeling awkward. How do you tell someone you want to build their child a car without sounding like a lunatic? The woman tilted her head, curious. "Is this about my daughter? Did she cause trouble at the park or something?" "No, nothing like that," Henry assured her quickly. "Actually, I noticed her sitting there the other day, and I got to thinking, well, I was wondering if I could build her something. A little car just for her, something she can drive herself." The woman blinked, clearly surprised. "A car? For her?" "Yes, ma'am. I've got tools, spare parts. I think I can put something together that'll work for her. Hand controls instead of pedals, sturdy enough to handle bumps in the road. It won't cost you anything. I'll use what I've got lying around." For a moment, the woman just stared at him, her expression unreadable. Then, slowly, her lips curved into a smile. "You're serious about this, aren't you?" "As a heart attack," Henry replied with a grin. She laughed softly, shaking her head. "You're either crazy or the nicest man I've ever met. Maybe both." They sat down at the kitchen table, and Henry explained his plan in more detail. He promised not to rush it. He wanted to get it right. The woman listened quietly, occasionally nodding or asking questions. When he finished, she reached across the table and took his hand. "You have no idea how much this means to us," she said, her voice thick with emotion. To her, "Thank you, Henry. Really." Henry felt a lump rise in his throat. "Don't thank me yet," he joked lightly. "Let's see if I can actually pull it off." Over the next few days, Henry threw himself into the project with a passion he hadn't felt in years. He sketched designs late into the night, scribbling notes and measurements on scraps of paper. During the day, he scavenged his garage for parts, old motors, batteries, pieces of metal, and began assembling them bit by bit. It wasn't easy. There were moments when he doubted himself, when things didn't fit quite right or wires refused to connect. But every time frustration crept in, he reminded himself why he was doing this, for the little girl who deserved to feel free, even if just for a few minutes. Word spread quickly around Maplewood about what Henry was up to. Neighbors stopped by the garage to check on his progress, bringing snacks or offering advice. Kids peeked through the window, whispering excitedly about the magic car taking shape inside. Someone donated a battery charger, another offered a set of tiny tires. Even Mrs. Peterson sent over a batch of cookies saying they were for inspiration. With each passing day, the car came closer to completion. It wasn't fancy, far from it, but it was sturdy and functional, built with care and purpose. Henry painted it a bright shade of blue, the color the girl loved most, and added decals of stars and planets all over it. He wanted it to feel magical, like something out of one of her favorite books. Finally, after weeks of hard work, the car was ready. Henry stood back and admired it, pride swelling in his chest. It wasn't perfect, but it didn't need to be. All that mattered was that it worked, and that it brought joy to the person it was meant for. Now all that was left was to show it to her. Henry woke up early on the day he planned to unveil the car. The morning air was crisp and sunlight streamed through his bedroom window, casting golden streaks across the floor. He'd been working on this project for weeks, pouring his heart, soul, and every spare moment into it, and now the big moment had finally arrived. As he got dressed, his hands trembled slightly with a mix of excitement and nerves. What if she didn't like it? What if something went wrong? He pushed those thoughts aside and headed to the garage. The little blue car sat in the corner, polished, and gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Its hand controls were smooth, its tires sturdy, and the decals of stars and planets sparkled faintly as though they belonged in the night sky. Henry ran his fingers over the hood one last time, making sure everything was perfect. Then he loaded the car onto a makeshift trailer attached to his old truck and drove toward the park where the girl often spent her afternoons. When he arrived, the scene felt almost surreal. Word about the special surprise had spread quickly. Through Maplewood, thanks to Mrs. Peterson's gossip network, dozens of people had gathered near the playground. Kids clutching balloons, parents holding cameras, and even some of Henry's regular customers who rarely left their homes unless absolutely necessary. There was a buzz of anticipation in the air, laughter mingling with excited chatter. Someone had even brought a small table topped with cookies and lemonade, turning the event into an impromptu celebration. Henry parked his truck and carefully unloaded the car. He positioned it at the center of the crowd, covering it with a bright red sheet so no one could see what lay beneath. The girl and her mom arrived shortly after, walking slowly toward the gathering. When the girl saw the crowd, her eyes widened in surprise. She looked around, clearly unsure why everyone seemed so focused on her. "Hi there," Henry said warmly, kneeling down to meet her gaze. "I've got something for you. Something I think you're really going to like." The girl tilted her head, curiosity lighting up her face. "For me?" she asked, her voice soft but full of wonder. Henry nodded. "Yep, just for you. But first, we need to do this properly." He turned to the crowd and raised his hands to quiet them. "Everyone, thank you for coming today. This is a very special occasion because it's not every day that someone gets to see their dreams come true. So, without further ado..." He grabbed the edge of the red sheet and gave it a dramatic tug. The car emerged like a starburst, catching the sunlight and drawing gasps from the crowd. The girl's jaw dropped, her eyes growing impossibly wide. For a moment, she didn't move or speak. She just stared at the car, her expression frozen somewhere between disbelief and awe. Is this really mine?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "It sure is," Henry replied, smiling. "Go ahead, take a closer look." She wheeled herself forward hesitantly, as if afraid the car might disappear if she got too close. Her mom stood nearby, tears streaming down her face as she watched her daughter's reaction. When the girl reached out to touch the shiny blue surface, her fingertips lingered reverently, tracing the outline of a planet decal. "It's beautiful," she murmured, her voice barely audible over the cheers of the crowd. "But how does it work?" Henry crouched beside her, pointing to the hand controls mounted on the steering wheel. "See these? You use them to go forward and stop. No pedals, just your hands. Want to try it out?" Her entire face lit up, and she nodded eagerly. With Henry's help, she transferred from her wheelchair into the driver's seat. It was a snug fit, but she looked completely at home, gripping the wheel like a seasoned racer. Henry adjusted the seatbelt and stepped back, giving her space. "Ready?" he asked. She took a deep breath, her hands steady on the controls. "Ready?" With a gentle push of the throttle, the car hummed to life. At first, she moved cautiously, inching forward as the crowd erupted into applause. But soon, confidence replaced caution, and she began zipping around the parking lot, laughing with pure joy. Kids chased after her, waving and shouting encouragement, while adults wiped away tears, overcome by the sight of her happiness. Henry watched from the sidelines, his chest swelling with pride. This was more than just a car. It was freedom, independence, a chance for her to experience the world in a way she never thought possible. Every smile, every cheer, every tear told him he'd done the right thing. As the afternoon wore on, the Meet You celebration continued. Neighbors shared stories, kids played tag, and plates of food circulated among the crowd. The girl kept driving her new car, stopping occasionally to hug Henry or show off her skills to anyone who would watch. Her mom approached him at one point, pulling him aside for a private conversation. "I don't know how to thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You've given her something I couldn't, a piece of herself back. She's always dreamed of being able to move like the other kids, and now she can. Thank you, Henry, from the bottom of my heart." Henry shook his head, embarrassed by the praise. "Don't mention it," he said gruffly. "I just wanted to help." But deep down he knew this moment meant as much to him as it did to her. Building the car had reminded him why he loved tinkering in the first place, not just to fix things but to make lives better. And seeing her face light up like that was worth more than any paycheck. By the time the sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, the crowd started to disperse. The girl reluctantly climbed out of her car, promising to take good care of it. Before leaving, she hugged Henry tightly, her arms wrapping around his neck. "Thank you," she whispered. "I'll never forget this." Neither would Henry. As he packed up the leftover snacks and folded the chairs, he realized something important. Life wasn't just about fixing broken engines or keeping busy. It was about finding ways to make the world brighter, one kind act at a time. And sometimes all it took was a little creativity, a lot of determination, and a willingness to care. Little did Henry know, this was only the beginning of his story. The days following the big reveal were a whirlwind for Henry. Life in Maplewood had always been quiet, predictable even, but now it felt like the entire town was buzzing with energy, and all because of a little blue car. Everywhere he went, people stopped him to talk about it. At the grocery store, the cashier handed him his change with a smile and said, "That was some good work you did, Henry." Even strangers visiting from neighboring towns mentioned hearing about the mechanic, who built a car for a girl in a wheelchair. At first, Henry didn't think much of it. He wasn't one to seek attention or bask in praise. To him, what he'd done wasn't extraordinary. It was just something that needed doing. But then things started to change in ways he never expected. One evening, as he sat on his porch sipping coffee and watching the sunset, his phone buzzed repeatedly. It was unusual for him to get so many notifications, especially since most of his contacts were family members or old customers. When he checked the screen, he saw dozens of messages flooding in, not from friends or neighbors, but from people he didn't know. Curious, he opened one of them and found a link to a video. Clicking on it, he realized someone had filmed the unveiling of the car at the park. The clip showed the girl's wide-eyed reaction, her laughter as she drove around for the first time, and the cheers of the crowd. Someone had posted it online, and within hours it had gone viral. By the next morning, the video had millions of views, with comments pouring in from all over the world. "This is what humanity should look like," read one comment. "You're an inspiration, sir," another person wrote. "Can we crowdfund this guy to build more cars like this? Imagine how many lives he could change." Henry scrolled through the comments, feeling both amazed and overwhelmed. People were calling him a hero, a genius, a saint. But inside, he still felt like the same old mechanic who fixed rusted trucks and patched up old engines. He didn't understand why everyone was making such a fuss. All he'd done was build a car. Sure, it was special, but it wasn't rocket science. Still, the attention kept growing. Local news stations picked up the story, sending reporters to interview him at his garage. They parked their vans outside, cameras rolling as they asked question after question. "What inspired you to do this? How long did it take to build the car? Do you plan to make more vehicles like this?" Henry answered honestly, keeping his responses short and humble. "I just saw a chance to help someone, and I took it," he told them. That's all there is to it. But the media frenzy didn't stop there. National outlets caught wind of the story, and soon Henry's face was appearing on TV screens across the country. Talk shows invited him to share his journey. Magazines featured him in feel-good articles, and social media users hailed him as proof that kindness still existed in the world. Strangers sent letters and gifts to his garage. A handmade quilt from Texas, a box of chocolates from New York, even a framed photo of a child in a wheelchair with a note that read, "Thank you for showing us what's possible." Despite the sudden fame, Henry tried to stay grounded. He kept working at his garage, fixing cars and chatting with customers like nothing had changed. But deep down, he knew things had changed. His life would never be the same again. One afternoon, as he tinkered with an engine, a thought struck him. Maybe this was an opportunity. Not for himself, but for others. If one little car could bring so much joy to one girl, imagine what could happen if he built more. Imagine how many kids, how many families could benefit from something like this. He couldn't do it alone, of course. Building one car had taken weeks of hard work and countless donated parts. Scaling it up would require resources, support, and expertise he didn't have. As if on cue, fate stepped in. A few days later, while Henry was replacing a timing belt in an old sedan, a shiny black limousine pulled up outside his garage. It looked completely out of place among the dusty pickup trucks and beat-up sedans. For a moment, Henry thought it must be lost. Who in Maplewood needed a limo? But when the door opened and a sharply dressed man stepped out, clutching a briefcase, Henry realized this wasn't a wrong turn. "Mr. Carter?" the man asked, approaching him with an outstretched hand. "My name is Mr. Alden. I represent Innovate Auto Works." Henry wiped his greasy hands on a rag and shook the man's hand, confused. Nice to meet you. What brings you here?" Mr. Alden smiled warmly, his polished shoes gleaming under the fluorescent lights. "We've been following your story closely, Mr. Carter. Your creativity, your craftsmanship, it's truly remarkable. We believe your work has the potential to inspire real change on a global scale." Henry raised an eyebrow, skeptical. "Global scale? I'm just a mechanic." "And a brilliant one at that," Mr. Alden replied. "Our company specializes in designing accessible vehicles for people with disabilities. When we saw what you did for that young girl, we knew we had to reach out. We'd like to offer you a position as head of innovation at our headquarters. You'd lead a team dedicated to developing cutting-edge solutions for mobility challenges. Your ideas could revolutionize the industry and improve countless lives." Henry stared at him, stunned. A job offer? From a major automotive company? This wasn't part of the plan. He hadn't built the car for recognition or career advancement. He'd done it because it felt right. Now, suddenly, he was being asked to leave everything behind, the garage, the town, the simple life he cherished, and step into a world he barely understood. Henry stammered, unsure how to respond. I'll need some time to think about it. Of course, Mr. Alden said smoothly, handing him a business card. Take all the time you need. But please know, Mr. Carter, this isn't just about you. It's about the impact you can have. Think about it. With that, the man climbed back into the limo, which glided away as silently as it had arrived. Henry stood there, staring at the card in his hand, his mind racing. For the rest of the day, he couldn't focus on anything else. Every bolt he tightened, every gear he adjusted seemed mechanical compared to the weight of the decision ahead. Should he accept the offer? Could he really walk away from Maplewood, from the life he'd built? Or should he stay, content knowing he'd already made a difference? By the time night fell, Henry still didn't have an answer. But one thing was clear. His quiet, unassuming life was about to get a whole lot more complicated. That night, Henry couldn't sleep. The business card Mr. Alden had given him sat on the kitchen table, glowing faintly in the dim light of the overhead bulb. He stared at it like it was some kind of puzzle he couldn't quite solve. On one side, there was his life, the garage, the town, the simplicity he'd always cherished. On the other, there was this offer, a chance to take his skills to a bigger stage, to build things that could help people all over the world. He poured himself another cup of coffee, though he knew caffeine wasn't going to calm his racing thoughts. Instead, he decided to walk. Sometimes moving helped clear his mind, and besides, the quiet streets of Maplewood were peaceful under the stars. As he strolled past darkened houses and empty parks, he let his mind wander. The idea of leaving Maplewood didn't sit well with him. It wasn't just the place, it was the people. They weren't just customers, they were friends, neighbors, part of his daily rhythm. Mrs. Peterson from the bakery, who always slipped him an extra donut when she thought he looked tired. Old Mr. Thompson, who came by every week for advice on his truck, but really just wanted someone to talk to. And then there was the girl. Her laughter still echoed in his ears whenever he closed his eyes. She was the reason he'd built the car in the first place. Could he really leave her behind? But as much as his heart pulled him toward staying, his head kept reminding him of something else. Opportunity. Not for himself necessarily, but for others. If he said yes to Innovate Auto Works, he could design vehicles that would change lives. Not just one life, but hundreds, maybe thousands. Kids like the girl in the wheelchair wouldn't have to dream about freedom anymore. They could live it. Families struggling to find affordable mobility solutions might finally catch a break. The scale of what he could accomplish was staggering. Still, doubt lingered. Was he ready for this? He wasn't a corporate guy. He didn't wear suits or give presentations. His idea of innovation was duct taping two mismatched parts together until they worked. How could someone like him fit into a world of boardrooms and billion-dollar budgets? By the time he circled back to his house, the sky was starting to lighten. Dawn was creeping over the horizon, painting the fields in soft shades of pink and orange. Henry sighed, feeling no closer to an answer than he had hours ago. But he knew he couldn't make this decision alone. This wasn't just about him. It was about the ripple effect his choice would create. Later that morning, after grabbing a quick breakfast, Henry headed to the park where he'd first met the girl. He found her there, sitting in her little blue car, zooming around in circles while her mom watched from a nearby bench. When she spotted him, her face lit up, and she drove straight toward him, screeching to a halt right at his feet. "Morning, Henry," she chirped, grinning ear to ear. "Want to go for a ride?" Henry chuckled and crouched down beside her. "Maybe later. Right now, I need your mom's help with something." Her mom raised an eyebrow as she approached, clearly curious. "What's up, Henry?" He hesitated, unsure how to explain. "Well, something's come up. Something big. And I need advice." Over the next hour, Henry told them everything. About the job offer, the fancy company, the chance to build more cars like hers, but also about his fears, his doubts, his loyalty to Maplewood. He laid it all out, raw and honest, hoping they could help him see things more clearly. The girl listened intently, her brow furrowed in concentration. When he finished, she tilted her head and asked, "Why does it have to be either or? Can't you do both?" Henry blinked, surprised by the question. Both? Yeah, she said matter-of-factly. You can go work for the big company and still come back here sometimes. You're good at fixing stuff and we need you too. Her mom nodded slowly, adding, she's got a point. Maybe it doesn't have to be one or the other. If this is really important to you and to so many people, you owe it to yourself to try. Just promise us you won't forget about us. Henry felt a lump rise in his throat. Their words hit home in a way he hadn't expected. Maybe he didn't have to choose. Maybe he could find a way to balance both worlds, to chase this incredible opportunity without losing sight of where he came from. That evening, Henry called Mr. Alden. The man answered on the second ring, sounding eager. Mr. Carter, have you had a chance to think about our offer? I have, Henry replied, taking a deep breath. And I'm interested, but I've got conditions. There was a pause on the other end. Conditions? Yes, Henry said firmly. I'll join your team, but I want to keep ties with Maplewood. Every year I want to come back and host workshops, for kids especially. Teach them how to build their own mini cars, inspire them to tinker and create. That's non-negotiable. To his relief, Mr. Alden laughed warmly. Mr. Carter, I think we can make that happen. In fact, I love the idea. It aligns perfectly with our mission to empower communities through innovation. They talked details for a while longer, ironing out logistics and timelines. By the time they hung up, Henry felt a strange mix of excitement and apprehension. This was it. A new chapter, a leap into the unknown. But somehow, knowing he wouldn't lose touch with Maplewood made it feel less daunting. The following weeks flew by in a blur. Henry spent his days preparing for the move, packing up tools and memories alike. The townsfolk threw him a farewell party at the diner, filling the room with laughter, tears, and enough food to feed an army. Everyone shared stories about how Henry had helped them. A flat tire fixed late at night, a loan extended during tough times, a listening ear when life felt heavy. It was overwhelming, humbling, and exactly what he needed to remind himself why he did what he did. On his last day in Maplewood, the girl and her mom stopped by the garage to say goodbye. She hugged him tightly, promising to take care of her car until he returned. Her mom handed him a small photo album filled with pictures of the car, the unveiling, and the joy it had brought to so many. For inspiration, she said softly, as Henry climbed into the limo that waited outside. He glanced back at the crowd gathered to wave him off. For a moment he felt a pang of sadness. But then he remembered the girl's words. You can do both. And with that, he smiled, ready to embrace whatever lay ahead. The drive to Innovate AutoWorks headquarters felt surreal. Henry sat in the back seat of the sleek black limo, staring out the tinted window as the familiar sights of Maplewood faded into the rearview mirror. The rolling hills, the weathered barns, the cozy diner where he'd shared countless meals, all slipped away, replaced by highways and city skylines that seemed to stretch endlessly toward the horizon. For someone who spent most of his life surrounded by wrenches and oil pans, this new world felt foreign. The limo itself was a far cry from his rusty old truck, with its plush leather seats and polished wood accents. Even the driver wore gloves, for heaven's sake. Henry shifted uncomfortably, feeling out of place but trying not to let it show. This wasn't just a job offer. It was an entirely different universe. When they finally pulled up to the headquarters, Henry couldn't help but gawk. The building was massive, all glass and steel, glinting in the sunlight like something out of a sci-fi movie. Inside, the lobby buzzed with activity. People in sharp suits typing furiously on laptops. Others gathered around sleek monitors displaying 3D models of futuristic vehicles. Everywhere he looked, there was innovation, energy, ambition. It was exhilarating, yes, but also intimidating. A young woman greeted him at the entrance, introducing herself as Clara, his assistant. "Welcome, Mr. Carter," she said warmly, shaking his hand. "We're so excited to have you here. Let me show you around." As she led him through the facility, Henry tried to take it all in. There were labs filled with engineers testing Prototypes, workshops stocked with high-tech tools he'd never seen before, even a virtual reality room where designers simulated car rides without ever leaving the building. Every corner brimmed with possibilities, ideas waiting to be brought to life. Yet, despite the excitement bubbling around him, Henry couldn't shake the feeling that he didn't belong. These people spoke a language he barely understood. Buzzwords like synergy and scalability flew past his ears, leaving him more confused than impressed. Still, he reminded himself why he was here. This wasn't about fitting in or impressing anyone. It was about making a difference. If he could channel this whirlwind of resources and talent into creating solutions for people who truly needed them, then every awkward moment, every uncomfortable silence would be worth it. Over the next few weeks, Henry dove headfirst into his new role. At first, it was overwhelming. Meetings stretched late into the night. Presentations required hours of prep, and emails flooded his inbox faster than he could read them. But slowly, he began to find his footing. He learned to navigate the corporate jargon, to ask questions when he didn't understand something, and to trust his instincts when everyone else seemed unsure. One day, during a brainstorming session, Clara turned to him and asked, "So what do you think we should focus on? You're the expert here." Henry hesitated, surprised by the question. No one had ever called him an expert before, at least not in this context. Back in Maplewood, he was just the guy who fixed cars. Here, though, they treated him like some kind of visionary. It was flattering, sure, but also daunting. What if he disappointed them? He cleared his throat and leaned forward. "Well," he began slowly, "I've been thinking a lot about accessibility. Not just for kids, but for adults too. People with disabilities often get overlooked when it comes to transportation. We can change that. Imagine designing vehicles that adapt to their needs, not as an afterthought, but as the main feature." The room fell silent for a moment, then erupted into nods and murmurs of agreement. One engineer raised his hand. "What about modular designs? Cars that can be customized depending on the user's specific challenges." "Exactly," Henry replied, his confidence growing. "And let's not stop at cars. Think bigger: wheelchairs, scooters, even public transit systems. If we can make mobility accessible to everyone, we'll be doing something truly groundbreaking." From that moment on, Henry became the heart of the team. His practical, hands-on approach balanced the theoretical brilliance of the engineers, while his stories from Maplewood kept everyone grounded. When things got complicated, he reminded them of the girl in the wheelchair, the sparkle in her eyes when she drove her little blue car for the first time. That image became their North Star, guiding every decision they made. Of course, adjusting to life outside Maplewood wasn't easy. Henry missed the quiet evenings tinkering in his garage, the friendly banter with customers, the comforting routine of small-town living. Some nights, lying awake in his hotel room, he wondered if he'd made the right choice. Was it selfish to leave behind everything he knew for this shiny new opportunity? Could he really live up to the expectations placed on him? But then, moments would happen that reassured him. Like the day he received a letter from a mother whose son used one of their newly designed wheelchairs to attend his first baseball game. Or the video message from a teenager who thanked Henry for inspiring her to pursue engineering. Each story reminded him that his work mattered, that even in this strange, fast-paced world, he could still make a difference. 6 months into the job, Henry returned to Maplewood for the first time. True to his promise, he hosted a workshop at the community center, teaching kids how to build mini cars using recycled parts. Dozens of families showed up, eager to learn and create. The girl with the wheelchair was there too, proudly showing off upgrades she'd made to her own car, a horn that played her favorite song, a custom paint job with glittery stars. As Henry watched her zip around the parking lot, laughing with newfound friends, he felt a wave of gratitude wash over him. This was why he did what he did, not for fame or fortune, but for moments like this, for the chance to give someone a little bit of freedom, a little bit of joy. That night, sitting on the porch of his childhood home, Henry realized something important. Life wasn't about choosing between two paths. It was about finding ways to walk both. He hadn't left Maplewood behind. He'd simply expanded his horizons. And in doing so, he'd discovered a purpose bigger than himself. With a contented smile, he leaned back in his chair and gazed at the stars. Somewhere out there, a little girl dreamed of exploring the universe, and thanks to him, maybe someday she would.